Welcome to another episode of the ChrisRodMaxShow, the AI podcast. Welcome, Chris. Great to have you this week.
Amazing. It's really good to be back and very excited for today's show.
And indeed it is, because we have a very interesting discussion of what's happening in the AI space. Some of you might have already seen about this clip, this reporting from the Wall Street Journal, how a reporter was able to create a 3-minute clip about a woman and her robot assistant. Did you see it, Chris?
Yes, I just took a look and it looks actually quite good. I mean, you can still see a little bit of that cartoonish type of quality to it, I would say, but in general, I think it's quite impressive for what it's worth.
Hey, Max. Great to have you.
Hello. Hi, folks. How you doing?
We're doing great. And we're talking about, this Wall Street Journal clip. So pretty much it was about a woman and her robot assistant. And it looks beautiful. Chris was just saying that maybe some elements a bit cartoonish. Did you watch it?
Yes, I did. It was really impressive. I mean, the time it takes to produce at the end, I guess it's gonna change the amount of media being put out, as if we don't have enough today already. So, yeah.
Yes, there is this factor, of course, that one has to think, hey, what before meant a whole production crew, maybe it meant, so here, finding a location, getting the talent, all this recording, maybe it would be like a weeks-long project. Now it can be done basically in a couple hours at most, right? And this is pretty much what I want to dig in today. What are like the tools and what's currently possible in the space of AI for video? And you might have seen that there was this announcement from Google for the latest model VO3, which lets everyone to create video clips, very realistic video clips with dialogue and sound, and it costs for an 8-second clip $1.50. Would you be using that? Chris, will you be paying $1.50 for your generated AI video?
I think so. I mean, right now, I would say, I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm using the OpenAI ChatGPT Pro version, just simply because I use so many prompts, and that's like $20, right? And now I started also using some other AI agentic platforms where I'm just like putting some money here and some credits there, and I think $1.50 is actually quite reasonable. I think to your earlier point around the quality and sort of like the speed to it, in my opinion, it's still a little bit 80-20 at this point in time, right? Like we're at a curve where it's very easy to generate 80% of the content you want, but it takes quite a bit of time to actually refine the last 20%. If I look at the Wall Street Journal video that you mentioned earlier, and what I said is cartoonish, I think what I mean by that is some of the shots look too perfect. Too perfect. It's almost like you're in an artificial studio and there's no chewing gum on the ground, nothing. Like everything looks very brilliant. I think that's the type of vibe that I get. Maybe for the audience that don't have the video in front of them right now.
Yes, and it's about what you're basically saying, Chris, where we're not right now at a point where one can say, hey, we just prompt something out and then we get like a full production level quality. But actually, one can see this behind the scenes with, here the Wall Street Journal video, and they show how they had someone like a prompt engineer expert who was pretty much gluing multiple tools. So they generated the avatar for the journalist with a tool. They used another tool to generate this robot body that was with her. Then, of course, they needed something for the voice. They need something for the music, and also another tool for animating it. So it's a little bit of like here gluing different tools for workflows. Still very patchy, but nevertheless, yeah. So it looks like something that perhaps could be used for pitching, right? So instead of coming to pitch a new show, just go present it to the producer, and this looks much more convincing than what we were doing previously. Max, in your case, so have you seen any of these new tools? For example, what about the Google VO3 or Runway or ElevenLabs? What's in your radar currently?
I think we've heard all of them definitely, but in terms of using them extensively, not so much on daily life yet. From a marketing perspective, I think to Chris's point or to your point as well, Rod, majority of the time when you go and pitch to a marketing client or video, which I've heard of it previously in my previous life, you would create some sort of I would call it storyboards, and then you bring it to a client, and then you show it to them what it would be like. Now you can almost bring it to life at a very short, at a very minimal cost to basically bring in, your clients on how the video would look like. It may not be the finished video, but at the very least, I feel like it's getting you closer and quicker into those pitches. So I mean, to I guess specifically answer your question, not so much yet, but I'm pretty sure it will come eventually.
And I want to ask you, the two of you. So, do you think we'll be like flooded with all this AI generated content, like all these videos that they look quite realistic, but at the same time not perfect? Maybe they're not 100% so human. Maybe they're a little bit uncanny. Will we be flooded with that across social media? And if yes, what do you think will be people's reaction? They will embrace it, or they will say, "Oh no, this is like fake. So I will rather watch something where there are actually humans there." What do you think, Chris?
Actually, my first reaction is like, I'm not even sure how much of the stuff we see every day is still real versus made up. I think that's number one. Number two, I think, especially maybe today or yesterday, I read a news about that YouTube has successfully now taken over all the screen share time of younger generations, something along those lines. Like basically nobody uses TV or I don't know, any other format of consumption of videos other than YouTube. And I think that is already quite significant. And I believe that, of course, with AI, you will just push so much more content into the internet to be consumed. I also believe that if you use it correctly, it can also enhance quite a bit of influencer video editing time. I think we should actually look into it, to be very honest, and to make sure that we make it more streamlined and more engaging. But yeah, of course, I mean, it's probably also enhanced the trend of fake news, fake content, fake whatever. And I mean, some of those have already been circling around on Instagram and TikTok and whatnot. On, I don't know, the let's say the leaders of the world dancing with each other. The Putins, the Trumps, and the Xi Jinpings, and these kind of like funny videos you already have, right? I don't know, Rod. What do you think about it yourself?
Well, I gotta say I subscribe completely what you're saying about content consumption. So I'm one of those who by now I only consume YouTube. When I say, hey, I have some free time to watch a video, before I say, hey, I'll go in on Netflix or I don't know, Disney Plus or whatnot. But now I feel, hey, this is like too much of a commitment. It means like half an hour watching something, and also it means spending time like browsing and finding what I want to watch and so on. So by now I just open YouTube, I see what's being recommended, and likely find something I like there. And that's pretty much how I consume video. But what I find scary is that until now, all these tools for video generation, they were more for the so-called B-roll, meaning, for example, now in our podcast, instead of people just seeing us talking, one could generate AI so to have as an extra like images on top, right? You hear our voice, but you're seeing what we're saying more or less to make it more visual. But now with this, one can do this, let's say like end to end, just like the prompt, and all of a sudden you have something that is no longer B-roll, but A-roll. Max, are you consuming mostly YouTube? What do you consume content-wise?
Very good question. I think if it's video, most of my time is with YouTube, definitely. And every time if I want to watch something, it's definitely going to be on YouTube. A lot of time I watch, I guess, podcast videos. I don't know why, but they just play on the background. Yeah, I don't even use like Apple Podcasts or Spotify for podcasts that much actually. So yeah, and it's funnily, you also have all your traditional I would say documentary filmmakers, right? So sometimes I think of like, if I'm not wrong, it's DN, the German broadcaster. Then you have the CNA from Singapore. All the different government-backed channels are also producing different documentaries. I find it quite interesting to watch. Right, you will see sometimes opposing ideas, but then equally being promoted. So that was also quite interesting for me. So to I guess Chris's point, I probably contributed to not watching TV anymore, and I don't actually have a TV at home, so there's that too.
And talking about that, so for us, the ChrisRodMaxShow, the podcast, most of our viewers come from YouTube. However, they're not subscribing, they're just watching. So if you're one of those, remember to click the subscribe button and then be informed every week about our new releases. And talking about here, Google Video 3. So we're seeing that it is the cost about $1.50 per video. And right now they're offering this plan where it is $250 per month. So that is part of this Google AI Ultra plan. So it's not only video, it comes with other like their Gemini and so on and so forth, and includes 83 videos per month. So you think that $250 per month and you get not only like a ChatGPT-like interface, you also get, of course, the video tooling and also many other goodies. And here I wonder, what do you think will happen? So for example, Hollywood, for all these, maybe even indie productions and so on, do you think we'll be seeing also, just like we're seeing now with, for example, IT developers and so on, there are all these waves of layoffs. Are we expected to see something along these lines for the show business? What are your thoughts, Chris?
Honestly speaking, I think, of course, I mean, let me answer this question from another angle, which is, what would we recommend our kids today to study? And I think that's a very tough question, right? Because I feel like in every branch we go, there's some AI disrupting, or at least right now co-piloting or co-helping you, supporting you on some of the tasks. But as you point out correctly, Rod, I think also with these very powerful tools where you can actually make, let's say you don't have to, like, maybe you start with just replacing a few scenes with AI, and then you sort of like make these very complicated, very costly productions actually much more affordable, because you don't have to like have all these special effects. You can just like add them in. Of course, this will have an impact on the film industry. And I think also, as we spoke last time, it's almost like you're democratizing film production even more than what we would see today. So I actually believe we all could now start making our own films just by prompting and by, curating and reiterating on it. And I think that's quite scary, actually. And that's exactly what we also see in other branches, right? Like, as you were saying, coding, engineering. I mean, you can build a pretty decent app website in like a couple of seconds. Yes, it takes a little bit of that, twisting and optimizing. So that's why I believe, as of now, the current technology we have gives us a good 80 type of quality of product or service. And then it's really about the 20 that needs to be refined still with humans. But, maybe in a year's time, we're going to sit here. And again, we're not even like actually present. It's just our avatars or whatever talking. Who knows?
And here I wonder, really, so if it is what people want to watch, or turns out that in fact, what they appreciate is really these conversations, these discussions between friends and so on, this is what they appreciate. And then if all of a sudden we have all these virtual avatars, they say, yeah, this is no longer real, no longer interesting. And thinking also that in this article, in this video from the Wall Street Journal, it was not only this model from Google, but also they were using Runway as, let's say, like the video clipping, video editing tool for that. And for those who do not know about Runway, this is valued already like at $3 billion. It received a $300 million investment from General Atlantic, and they're already working with major studios like Lionsgate and also Fabula, which they won some Oscars and so on. And Max, putting on your investor hat here, what's here your impression? Is it something where these valuations are justified? So here, putting here on Runway, 300 million at a 3 billion valuation, is it, let's say, maybe a bit bubbly? Is it a bit fraudy? Or rather, they're right now buying at the right time because this will explode, and in a few years, it will not be 3 billion, but 30 billion or more, 300 billion?
Answer is I don't know. It's very hard to tell you that, and it's not an industry that I really, really know well. But then if I were to just check quickly, right? So let's say the movie market revenue today, how much are we on? The global cinema box office revenue in 2022 is about 26 billion. So if a company, its value attributed depending on how much are they helping to produce that 26 billion, it's a question. Number one. Number two, also depends on whether or not this will expand the market. And I'm just talking about cinema box office, but how many people actually have access to box office today, right? Is there an opportunity to expand to more, different types of content, to include more people onto, I would say, different types of consumption or pattern of consumption? It's a little bit like how, when you talk about representation in movies, traditionally, when you watch movies, they are mainly, in the West, are mainly, I would say, folks that are in white faces. In Asia or in Hong Kong, mainly in Asian faces, but you start to see a mix of that. And what about the rest of the world, right? So I think it will unlock a lot more new type of content. I also think it will actually expand the market in general. I guess then the question becomes, what are people consuming left, right, and center? Ultimately, they're a tool to help to create content, and depends entirely on the value those contents are deriving, if that's a tool that you're using. That's one. And then the second thing is, I also felt that in this market, it's the competition is heating up, right? Like they're not the only player in town. There are quite a few big players that are out there, but I also don't think that they are going to be the only one out there. If it's about content, I suspect there might be a niche player that will be created somewhere. So, I don't know, in different corners of Earth. But happy to get both thoughts.
Honestly, guys, maybe just to piggyback on this, again, a couple of episodes before, we spoke about rewriting some of the movies that we didn't like the ending. Remember Game of Thrones? Like that last season was just so bad, and just imagine now we can actually rewrite it into something, or maybe we can add another season. And again, so basically, I'm thinking about two bold hypotheses for the future. The first is democratizing of sectors and industries that were not available or accessible for the mass. And this definitely is the whole, let's say, video and media industry, perhaps. That's number one. And if I look at Runway, I'm just so impressed by all their use cases and what they can actually build, and just, using the prompt. I think my second hypothesis is a little bit counterintuitive. So that's why maybe I will share that with you, which is I actually believe there is a revolution of creativity. Yeah, so we talk about, people in the creative space, they're like redundant and whatnot, and you have AI. But actually, I believe that it will be even more important to be creative and curious and coming up with great ideas that you can actually feed an AI with, right? And for the lack of a better word, and probably that word still needs to be invented, but to me, it's almost like being a really great product manager. It's almost like you look at your environment and you see these problems, and then you translate that into some kind of product idea or service idea or creative idea that you then feed into an AI prompt. And I think that skill will be so much more important in the future to come, as we go along with ChatGPT. I don't know. Any takers here?
I see both sides. I see that I was thinking now, so that on one side we have, let's say, this consumption part, right? And I was thinking, hey, what's the valuation of Netflix? What's the valuation of Disney? And Netflix currently valued at around 500 billion. Disney is around like 200 billion. But also I was thinking, we had to see from the producer side, so that these tools help people create new content, right? Not only consuming it passively, but actually being active and generating new things. And here, like Adobe will be like my reference. So here with Premiere and all the tooling for creators. And I think there are around like 180 billion market cap. So this made me think that we're seeing here a convergence of, on one side, this democratization of content creation. So not only is limited for high-end productions and big budgets, but basically everyone. And I see some trends here with children, actually, where like, so we as adults, when we think how we're as children playing, we'll have, let's say, like toys, right? Like we'll have like dolls or like action figures and so on, and then we'll be creating the scenes, we'll be creating like whole stories and so on. But now, when I look at children playing, they're, instead of using toys, they're using, so like 3D worlds. They're using like open worlds like Minecraft. There are also other ones like Avatar World, Tokaboka, etc. So like things that as an adult likely one has never heard of. But basically, children play with these like open-ended worlds where the only thing that you do is maybe like create a home, maybe you have characters. They record themselves with voiceovers, and then they upload these videos to YouTube and other platforms. And they're just telling stories through these worlds in the same way that we used to tell them with like physical toys. So I can well see how these tools end up being used by in the same case, in the same manner. Basically, everyone just telling stories they like to tell in a much easier manner. Would you agree, or you think it might turn out differently?
Yeah, I mean, to Chris's point, right? So the democratization of creativity, first of all, it makes it a lot easier. We already see some of that. For example, when Twitter came out, everyone became journalists. And when YouTube came out, everyone started to become filmmakers. And then, that to a certain extent already helped a lot of, the democratization. Then come the tools to allow people to do it. Now you have basically multiple different tools to be able to create more videos, sometimes even better CG that you could probably do previously. I think to your point, Rod, if we were to take this, then put it onto the hands of kids, then the question becomes, what sort of things they will create. It would be quite interesting to see because, when it comes to being a kid, your creativity is relatively unbounded, right? So you basically just go whatever takes you. That open world gives them the ability to express their creativity. And instead of being, I guess, bounded by physical toys per se. I think also to a certain extent, kids are also watching YouTube more than kids back then. So we're already seeing some of that happening. Um,
Absolutely. And this thing that you described there, I also wonder here. So you were saying with YouTube, we had suddenly everyone could become a filmmaker. But in YouTube and also with other platforms, you have this situation where you have the consumers. YouTube has like 2.5 billion users or something, like an enormous amount. And there are around like 100 million channels, right? So there is like the relation between content producers and content consumers is completely different. And I wonder here if through these AI tools, maybe that become more even, and then suddenly more of us will start to create content instead of just being so content consumers. And thinking further about that, it's not only about video, it's also about voice. If you've seen that Wall Street Journal clip, the robot is able to talk, and also there are the characters there and so on. And those voices were generated with ElevenLabs. This is a company actually based in London, also valued in so like a massive amount, and for good reason, because pretty much now it has become the de facto standard how if one thinks about AI for voice, what would be the tool for that? And there is some reporting that, for example, the voice, so to say, like donors that they're giving their voice, the recording of their voices, that generate these AI voices, they're being paid up to $10,000 per month. And they've been paying around $5 million just on voice actors that are providing these sources for the original voices for this sort of like marketplace. And I'm here like thinking, so Chris and Max, if you think of like here voice for AI, would you think that on one side, this may become like commoditized? Do you think that there is really like a market for that? Or do you feel that rather maybe soon every device will have some sort of like voice generating capabilities, and therefore pretty much if we it's like prompt, give me like the voice of like a Texan older man, in seconds we will have it. What do you think about this market? Chris, your thoughts?
Well, I'm sure Scarlett Johansson would get probably quite a bit of money for her voice to be used everywhere. I mean, there was this like famous movie, Her, I think, where she actually played the voice of the AI. Um, I mean, to be honest, I guess there are these voice actors out there now. I'm glad that they have another, let's say, purpose. But again, I also believe, as we've seen with data, we can also probably will see some synthetic voices like made up out of like a history or like a database of voices that already exists, and you just kind of like tweak it and turn it, and then you get more voices that you don't uh need an original actually. And so for me, this whole market around voice actors is somewhat limited. It's a temporary thing. It's probably as temporary as a prompt engineer, right? Like nowadays, you don't even need prompt engineers anymore because you can actually just have OpenAI or ChatGPT come up with good prompts. So it's, I think, a little bit similar to this voice actor or voice donor market, because I think we are currently in a transitional period of time. I mean, it's the same idea as with the translators, right? So there you still employ humans to translate things from A to B, but maybe give it another 1 year, that's actually not required anymore. That's my take on it.
And thinking from another side, so not only here from this offer of AI voices, but rather like the demand for that. There was a recent article from the Financial Times about UBS, the large Swiss bank, deploying AI videos where what they're doing is basically they're recording the voice and so the faces of their analysts, and then pretty much having these AI avatars narrate investment notes. So instead of you receiving like a report with maybe some charts and so here a written report, you're getting a video from the analyst covering the company, but this analyst is not an actual human. It's actually an AI avatar. And they're saying that they want to generate basically more than 5,000 videos annually. Max, you're in all this finance space. So do you see this as becoming the norm in that, let's say, maybe if you're like a very high-level investor, you'll still get this bespoke human treatment. But however, if you are maybe like a retail investor, then you got to watch here some AI avatar narrating how, for example, Netflix is performing.
I mean, when it comes to like watching videos and narratives, there are already AI doing some of that. Whether or not it's a video, it's a different story, right? I think the last few episodes I mentioned there's a company that's already doing analysts. So they basically built AI analysts for a specific part of financial services research. So you can think of like a macro analyst speaking to a specific earnings analyst, and they will create a podcast about that. To a certain extent, the information are already being put together using AI. Whether or not you would deliver that in a video format, I think it entirely depends on who your end consumers are. I know, for example, previously in the FinTop, was it FinTop or Flinfluencers or something like that, TikTok folks that basically giving out financial advice online. So people tend to consume those. So I guess in a way, this is for banks to compete with that. But the question that I have in my head is, who are your target market? How would people even consume this? Do people even have time to watch videos of breakdown of markets? What is the biggest and the fastest way to consume those information? Um, I I don't know. I mean, it will be an interesting experiment for sure, because it also entirely depends on UBS's client segment, right? Because UBS obviously is one of the biggest private bank, the bank for the richest. So I would be quite keen to see how would the rich people react to that. So yeah, I actually do not have an idea how that will pan out, but I am quite interested to see the output.
And absolutely, also in the comment section of this article, there was like a long discussion about people saying, how can this be possible if, for example, we can consume as humans content much faster reading it than watching it? So who is this for? But then the counter argument was rather that different people have different ways to process information. Some are more visual, some are more like maybe like audio oriented, and others more like reading oriented, and so on. And this way, it's possible to basically reach out different segments. And then like the third narrative, it was maybe like a situation in our current society of lack of attention. And they're saying this is just a way for people that so say claim that they've been informed while they're, for example, like cooking or driving or whatever, but not really absorbing information and understanding what's happening, right? So like you're doing this on the side, you're listening to this AI avatar narrating how Netflix is performing, while at the same time doing something else. And then you halfway understood what's going on, but it's not the same as here being focused. And it's not only here with voice, with video, where there is on one side this arms race where we have multiple entrants. We also have like the demand for that, and also the question of what's happening with those incumbents in that entertainment space whose maybe like livelihoods might be completely upended, completely changed because of all these so AI new tools. It's also happening with video generation, where for this clip, the robot, the body was generated with Midjourney. And Midjourney is not the only tool in the space. Midjourney is quite popular. It was one of the first ones together with DALL-E from OpenAI. There is, for example, another one called Recraft. They received recently a 30 million Series B by Axel. And pretty much here, you see how you have these, let's say like 500-pound gorillas, like a Midjourney, DALL-E, so who have this very large brand awareness. But then you have new so commerce to the market, like here Recraft. And here what I wonder, so for example, so Chris, you are like a very creative person, right? Like you also, for many years, you've been using Photoshop and so on. Have you been exploring these new video editing tools, or do you stay within the Photoshop realm?
Honestly speaking, it's been a while since I used Photoshop, and I believe they also have integrated AI now. So the short answer is no. But I also feel like there's a intersection now between creativity and technology in general. I've been dabbling a little bit with Cursor.ai, sort of like building websites and products, and to me that is actually creating. It's also being creative. And I mean, there's so much you can already prompt already. So no, I don't need any, or I'm not using any creative tools at this point in time. But yeah, I believe there's a bit of that conversion happening. And I think at the end, again, to my earlier point, is that it's almost like we need to like guide the AI on the aesthetics, right? It's more about like the visual eye that you have to like make sure that things look very pretty or very nice or as to your pleasing, I would say. So that's what I'm doing. But I don't know, Rod, do you use it somehow? Or when was the last time you used Photoshop?
It's been years since I last used Photoshop. Rather, these days I use primarily Canva. So where at first glance one will say, "Hey, this is like a toy. This is like the so playful version of Photoshop." But actually, you can get, let's say, like 80-90% of the results. So using Canva instead of using Photoshop, and it has a lot of like AI functionalities. So I quite like it. But also I use here Recraft, and Recraft is quite cool for example, generating AI art that you want that stays within brand. So let's say you are, for example, like a bank or something, and you say, "Hey, I want to create maybe some visuals of some creative work for maybe this so leaflet that I'm putting out, and it needs to stay within the company colors and so on." Getting all this right with, let's say, like here DALL-E and Midjourney is a bit more challenging. Whereas with Recraft, you can much more easier have it stay consistent within brand, and also create, for example, let's say like this visual, virtual, like product placements where you say, "Hey, I want to look how, for example, like a cup will look with my logo." And then you can very easily have like the photo of the cup and then so superimpose the logo and make it look like a real thing and not like here Photoshop, like copy pasted together, right? So I find it very, very nicely done, this Recraft. And I'm also thinking here from a business model perspective, Max. So here I see a company that's definitely threatened by all this, which is Adobe, where right now, if you are like a creator, you say, "Hey, I need to use Adobe, and this costs, I think, like $600 per year. So it's a rather pricey tool for individuals." And now you have all these tools, AI tools, that are more affordable, maybe not necessarily super cheap, but more affordable. So do you think that on one side, this Adobe monopoly will be maybe like weakened? Will they be like in trouble? This is one thing. Another thing, from a consumer side, does that mean that now, just like, for example, with Netflix, if you want to watch everything, you need like 5 different streaming tools? might we be seeing something similar as well for AI creativity, where we might need not only one but rather like 5 different subscriptions, and perhaps what we were paying Adobe as a bundle, we'll be paying it to 5 different vendors?
So, um, so to answer the question, I think I'll take the second one first. The unbundling of Adobe in a way already happened, right? I'm already paying for a different subscription in different places and never subscribed to Adobe for a long time. I remember learning Adobe Photoshop. I don't know, like in like primary school. That just shows how old I am, right? It was so long ago. And that was the only thing that you learned is like, oh, if you want to have a future, you have to go have a giant massive CPU and learn how to use Adobe. It's like, bruh, I don't need to. So now fast forward, when it comes to like the stack to do creative stuff, I think that is definitely true. So I basically use ChatGPT a lot for any sort of research, any sort of questioning. Sometimes I even use it to list out decision-making process that I would have done on a spreadsheet. Just compare two things, right? Tell me everything about this. Tell me everything about that. Make a quick comparison. Let me know what you think. So that's one way. And you could also then go down. I've been playing with Lovable. I was lucky enough to get some access to Lovable, and it was really cool. Like within minutes, I created a mock-up really, really quickly, and it's clickable prototype. It's not even a mock-up; it's clickable prototype. And then from there, if I want to, add stuff to it, like Suno, like the WSJ video that talks about it, I could. I could just go on Suno and just create something that feels like whatever it is that I'm building. So I must say, at the moment, it feels like the early days of internet. You have multiple different tools, everyone's trying different things until you find one that really, really sticks. So far, the one that has stuck with a lot of us are ChatGPT and maybe Perplexity. So for some searchers, some still prefer Claude for writing. And I think it really depends on how people are feeling. It really reminds me of like the early days of I know this is probably not a good thing to say, like illegal streaming. When it comes to illegal streaming, there were like multiple different websites. Everyone using LimeWire, someone using I don't know, I don't know. There's a Chinese one called Thunderbird or something like that. Like so people are just trying different tools. So to answer your question, is it threatening Adobe? I think for serious folks, not so much yet, but I think if I'm Adobe, I'll be very, very scared about what's about to come because you can see it already happening in different parts of consumer landscape. Um, so I think it's bound to happen. Maybe they will buy one or two and they will stay in the game.
That could well be right, that to protect their monopoly, they start buying all the different newcomers. And you're also mentioning here Suno. So for those who do not know, it's basically a tool for generation of music, so here also audio and so on. And I find it's also super practical in that one common problem for those who are creating content is suddenly dealing with, for example, copyright, not knowing, hey, can I use this commercially? All the time you see on YouTube videos of people complaining that they were demonetized because turns out that the audio that they were using, the music that they were using had some copyright claim behind. And now with tools like Suno, you can pretty much like prompt out some new song that's unique and pretty much where like the copyright, so to say, belongs to you, right? And it only costs around $8 per month. So it's quite affordable and allows pretty much everyone to start creating like music. And here also what I'm thinking from a perspective now that we're discussing about bundling and unbundling, what do you think, Chris? Do you see that rather we'll be having multiple specialized tools like Max was mentioning now here? So, for example, a Lovable for here, so front end web app generation, maybe like Recraft for image generation, Adobe like Photoshop type of tools? Or do you feel that long term, rather it'll be like one universal prompt that'll be, let's say, like ChatGPT or any of these other large players, and from that you'll churn out everything, websites, music, video, and we'll just stay in this monopoly of ChatGPT?
Honestly speaking, guys, I think it's a bit of a cycle, right? Like there's a bit of that unbundling, then bundling, unbundling, bundling. Why is that? I mean, I think it just follows the traditional innovation S curve, if you want, right? Like you have a certain business model and a certain bundling. So, for example, in this case, you have Adobe with their product suite, and you have one subscription that rules them all. And then, of course, you have these new entrants coming in, and they're like tackling one specific feature, but that's just by definition and by design that they can't tackle everything at the same time. And so they're just really hyper focused on one single feature, use case, or area. And then, of course, you have a lot of fragmentation going on. And I think that's exactly what we see right now in the AI space. Like, actually, for any use case you can come up with, I'm sure you can find at least 10 players that are sort of trying to crowd and get market share away from some incumbents, from the Salesforce to, other SaaS or software companies. So I think that, to me, is very normal. And I think right now we're in this like fragmentation stage where, okay, now there's this new technology called AI or GenAI, and now everyone's sort of like coming to the table, trying to like solve the problem better and trying to like get our money or your money out of the pocket for a better quality product. And then once, I think, let's say maybe 5 to 10 years down the line, you have these new business models established, and maybe also, maybe let's say Runway, which is still a bit of a new entrant type of company, become the next, go-to software for video creation. And then they would probably also have other tools and features and subsidiaries amongst them. So perhaps we would see voice or special effects, whatever, like different types of related use cases and features within that bigger company, becoming the next Google, so to speak.
Definitely. And I think this is really so how we can summarize what we're seeing. So you're saying, Chris, where there's this bundling and unbundling so of software. We also, Max was mentioning here also with streaming. So where at some point there were so many illegal websites for illegal streamings, but then we had suddenly Netflix and it became not anymore a need. So you say, hey, what's the point of downloading something illegally if I can just go and watch it on a Netflix? And now perhaps with this unbundling also on the streaming side, we're seeing more and more that, again, people are exploring more what can be out there such that I do not have to pay here for 5 different streaming services in order to watch everything I want to watch. And I said with this, we can basically wrap today's show, where we've seen how we have these developments that are happening so fast. If we see how AI video just looked last year and how it looks now, the difference is dramatic. And not only that, but also how suddenly we can create end-to-end complete small movies that look very realistic, that if one is not paying attention, if one is not looking it on maybe like the large screen, maybe looking at their phone, we'll say, hey, yeah, this is like a movie about here this journalist and her robot body and so on, and looks like it will be airing out soon on Netflix or something. And as usual, so if you like this show, leave your comments, remember to like, subscribe, leave all your feedback, and let's meet next week for another episode of the ChrisRodMaxShow. Until next time.